Hey, everybody, I'm Jason Mefford, and I'm here with Brad Miller. And today we're going to talk about getting some answers. And I know as we turn it over to Brad here to kind of explain a little bit how this topic kind of came up, but it's interesting, especially on a spiritual path. A lot of people are always looking for answers, right? And a lot of times the people are looking for answers outside of themselves, and the reality is, all the answers are inside. And so that's what we wanted to kind of talk about today. Because I think, those of you that are listening, you may or may not understand this. You may think you understand it, but yet you still find yourself looking for those answers from some other place. So we can kind of share about what we found, and Brad maybe kind of share a little bit about the impetus for how this kind of came up and why we want to talk about it today.
So I've been doing a lot of reading lately, about the topic kind of about spirituality and things. And one of the kind of the series, the books that I'm going through is talking about kind of consciousness and the idea that we are creating our reality based on our consciousness or things inside us that we are that the power of creating, the power of all these answers and things that we're looking for, all of that is stuff that is kind of internal to us. And like you said, we do a lot of looking outside. And I've done this before too, where you try to find answers, and so we go and we look out, where can I find it, reading books and talking to people, and people listen to us on a podcast, trying to find answers.
Yep.
But I mean we're I mean, at this point, we're like 40 some episodes in. You can tell by now we're not giving you any answers. Like, I have no answers to give. Like, I don't know anything. Um, there's nothing that I can tell you. I can merely explain my experiences and the things that I've kind of witnessed and things that I've done. And I know we've talked about this before in episodes, but that doesn't mean that because I've done it, it's going to work for you. And it doesn't mean that the stuff that Jason does is going to work for you as well. Everything is kind of internal to yourself. Like, we can merely give our view of how things work and what they're working for us. And again, I think that ties into the fact that, while, there are a lot of questions, I don't know the right way to put it, but a lot of things out there that I know people are searching for, whether it is, how do I get this thing that I want? How do I become more peaceful or, full of joy? How do I raise my vibration? Those kind of things. But ultimately, I think the reason why you're searching so much and why you can't have not yet been able to find the answers is because you're looking in the wrong place.
Yep. Yep.
All
No,
of it is actually inside. That's where you have to look to find it.
yeah, I think that's an important thing for people to understand, because like you said, I mean, we're sharing our experiences, what's worked for us, the answers maybe that were right for us. But again, an answer that's right for me may not be right for Brad. It may not be right for you. It may be right for you, right?
Could happen, yeah.
It could happen. And so we're just trying to explain what's going on. And so I think there's, to kind of set the stage on this, and then we can dig in deeper. There's a couple of things that kind of popped into my mind. There's an old story, and again, this probably didn't happen this way, okay, but maybe it did. I don't know. But there's kind of an old story that goes, when the gods were sitting around and and trying to decide, where they were going to hide the secrets of the universe, right? They were creating these humans, us, and they're like, well, we need to kind of give them the clues so they know how to progress and do everything that they're doing. And so there was this group of gods that were sitting around, and they're like, where should we hide it, right? And so here you have this kind of cosmic brainstorming session with a bunch of gods sitting around, And so they're sitting there, they're talking and they're thinking, and one of them raises his hand and says, "Hey, I got an idea. What if we bury it like really deep in the ocean?" And so they're like, "Oh, that maybe sounds like a good idea." And so they start talking about it, and eventually they kind of come to the point that they're like, even if we bury it all the way in the ocean, somehow humans are going to find some way, build submarines or do something. They're going to get down to the bottom of the ocean and they're going to find it that way. That's going to be too easy for them. So they're like, "Oh, okay, well, let's think of another reason." All right. So they're going along, and one of the other ones kind of raises his or her hand and says, "Well, what if we hide it at the top of a mountain, the highest mountain in the world?" Right. And so again, they started talking about it, and they're like, "Well, yeah, but it's kind of the same thing that might happen, with the ocean, right? Is they might find some way to be able to climb up that high. They can, put oxygen masks on or something, and somebody's still going to find it there." And they're like, "Ah, dang, right?" And so they're talking some more, and finally, somebody else raises their hand and says, "I got it. What if we just hide it within themselves?" And the rest of the gods looked at each other and they're like, "Yeah, they'll never think to look there." Right.
Mm.
And so, and the reality is that's where the answers already are. Right. I mean, your light being, your soul, your, whatever you want to call it, already has all the answers if you learn how to go inside yourself and find the answers from within. And I know it seems so elementary and so simple, but it's that way on purpose because that is one of the hardest things to do, right? And I'll tell you, a friend of mine that I've known for many years, and is kind of the quintessential example of this, right? Is she's got a lot of questions, she wants to evolve, she wants to progress spiritually, and so she keeps looking for the answers, right? And so what happens is that she's always looking outside, right? And so, she'll go to hypnosis sessions,
Mm.
right? She'll sign up, she'll go to a bunch of hypnosis sessions and think, "Oh, I'm going to find the answers there." And then she doesn't. And then she's like, "Well, hypnosis didn't really work, so let me do breath work. Breath work. That's going to help me find the answers." And so she goes and signs up for a bunch of breath work stuff, and she does that, and she finds a little bit of stuff, but it's still just not right there. And so, well, maybe I'll do something like Wim Hof, and like cold plunging and things like that, because maybe that's where the answers are. And so she goes and does that, right? And again, she gets a little bit of stuff, but doesn't really find the answers that she's looking for. Okay, well, let me do some some different plant medicine things, combo or ayahuasca or tonical, right? And that's going to help me, right, finally find the answers. And so I've literally watched her over years spend tens of thousands of dollars looking for the answer somewhere else when the whole time the answers are within herself. And when I try to explain it to her, she didn't want to understand. She didn't want to listen. Right. And
Well,
it's
sure,
like,
she's got 10 grand invested in this, right? Like,
no, she's got a lot more than 10 grand invested in it. Right. And it's like,
yeah.
but unfortunately that is where the answers actually are, right? And so until we can, now again, some of these methods are ways for us to go within ourselves, but that's where the answers already are, right? I mean, how many times have you heard somebody say something like, "You already know the answer," right?
I tell my daughter that all the time,
Yeah,
actually.
well,
So,
well, and that's a trick in coaching as well, right? Is it people that you're talking to somebody and you're like, "Well, so what do you think you should do?" "Oh, I don't know. I have no idea what I should do." Well, if you knew what to do, what would you do? Right? And so you ask the question that way, and boom, people will usually give an answer. Why? Because it's already within them. They just have to go in and look at it. And I don't know, Brad, if I've been guilty of some of the same stuff too. right?
Mhm.
Of trying to search for things other places when really I have all the answers I need myself if I'll actually look at it, and if I have the courage to actually admit and accept the answers that are within, because I think sometimes that's what scares us
Mhm.
is we're afraid of the answer. We know the answer, we just don't want to admit it, and so we're
Mhm.
always trying to go somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's tough sometimes. 'Cause yeah, you may not want to hear the answer,
Uh-huh.
you know, and so you put up barriers to keep that away, or you do some self sabotage because you are afraid, like, hey, I'm going to get this. So if I sabotage things enough, then and I get that anyway, well, then it's not me. It's not my fault. It's that this, XYZ happened, that these roadblocks that I put up, that's the reason why this didn't work. It wasn't me. Or that's the reason why, and it's not just obviously, finding answers, but we do this all the time,
Mm-hmm.
to try to keep from, um, disappointing is not really the right word, but to keep from getting negative outcomes and feeling like we're somehow less because we're not meeting our expectations or the expectations others have for us. And it's the same thing here, that we don't necessarily are afraid of what we're going to find when we sit in silence. And I know a lot of people have a problem sitting in silence because of what they may hear.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all the stuff they push down inside has the opportunity when they're sitting in silence to come back up. And there's a reason why they push all that stuff down, because they didn't want to deal with it. Their shit and stuff that's down there. And so by being
Mm-hmm.
quiet, that can pop up, and now they have to deal with it.
Well, because
You
it
know.
reminds me as you're talking about that, one of the other episodes that we did where it's like face the darkness kind of a thing, right? Is that sometimes when you're sitting in
Mm-hmm.
silence, it's those darkness and things that will come up, and you have to face those fears. You have to face the darkness. You have to deal with it, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times, we don't want to do that, right? And I think too, along with this, is I see so many people that want to be just given the answer as
Mm-hmm.
well, right?
The
They're
easy
like,
way out.
just give me the 10 steps that I have to do. Tell me the practice that I should do every single day. And the problem is, again, it's not necessarily the same for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it also can lead to a slippery slope that a lot of people have, which is they're looking for answers from someone else as well. And so, not only do a lot of people think, well, if I do these different practices, if I try plant medicine, if I try breath work, that's going to give me the answer. But a lot of times they look at individuals as the person who's going to give them all of the answers as well. And so again, this could look different for everybody. Somebody who maybe is brought up in a Buddhist tradition or comes to that thinks, oh, all the wisdom that I need is going to come from me reading the words of the Buddha, right? Or maybe someone who comes from more of a Christian background is going to say something like, hey, well, the teachings of Christ are going to give me everything that I need. So if I just read my Bible and if I pray to Jesus, then he's going to tell me all the things I need to do, right? Or, on this path too, there's a lot of people who they seek out a teacher or they seek out a master or a guru or whatever you want to call them, and then they just kind of blindly do what the person is telling them to do. Now it seems like a good idea, right? Because you're looking at this person who you think is kind of enlightened, and well, I'm just going to do everything that they tell me to do,
Sure.
and I'm going to get that way too. But
Mm-hmm.
just like we talked about, what made that person enlightened, if they actually are. So I'm going to throw that caveat out there,
Yeah.
because most of the people who set themselves up as spiritual teachers and are telling you what to do are not spiritual teachers at all. They're charlatans that are there to take your money. They're not actually true spiritual teachers or masters, right? And again, some people use the word guru, right? That's kind of an Eastern philosophy where again they kind of come to the point to where they hero worship certain people. And oh, whatever guru, whatever his or her name happens to be, I'm going to do that because they're my teacher. I'm going to do it, right? But a real and true master and true teacher will never tell you what to do. And so I want to get to what you kind of heard in those books too, because I think it's
Mhm.
important. But I know I've seen in my life as well that, when I work with certain people, I hear things like this all the time. Believe me, don't believe me, I don't care. You have to make up your own choice, right? You have to do what's best for you, right? They will ask you questions, um, but realize that you're the one who has to make the decision. You're the one who can do the work, right? I can't eat for
Mhm.
you is another thing that I've heard a lot, right? It's
Yep.
like, you have to be the one who does the work. You have to
Hmm.
go inside. You have to be the one who does the practices. Yes, they can teach you, right, what some of these things might be, but a true master will ask you questions and will give you lots of uh, how the right way to describe this is. But one of my friends kind of described it this way once, and he said, it's like when you go to a teacher, and he was referring to a particular person. But he says, when you go and when you sit with this person, they will load you up with gold and diamonds and jewels and things that are very precious. So much so that you cannot carry everything that they have given you. And you leave their presence and you're walking away and you start dropping things. And the tendency is, you want to stop and you want to pick it up. But what happens when your arms are full and you reach over to pick something else up? You drop
You
more.
more. Hmm.
You drop more, right? And so again, a lot of times you're given way more than you can ever consume realistically. And the important thing is to just learn and take a few of those things and then start applying them. Start eating for yourself. Start practicing these things and realize that you can't do everything, and that's all right. And that's what people will do. And again, true masters, true spiritual teachers, they don't come asking you for money, right? I mean, that's another thing that usually separates the real people from the people who are just the charlatans. A spiritual master isn't going to ask you for $10,000 to come live in their ashram for a month or a week, right? That's just not how they operate. Now, you end up bringing offerings, but that's something again that comes from your heart instead of them necessarily asking you for something. But I thought it was interesting. Again, that's just kind of my perspective and what I have seen. But I know you
Hmm.
had mentioned before we hit record about some of the stuff that you were reading in some of these books about masters as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. No, it's very, I mean, the very similar kind of stuff that, someone who is truly a master, a teacher, is not a teacher in the sense that we think of. Like, so my daughter, goes to school, and so her teachers every day, I'm assuming, sits there and says, all right, we're going to talk about math today, so open up your math books, and I'm going to go up to my blackboard or whatever they do nowadays, smart boards or something, and I'm going to show you how you do this problem. 1 + 1 = 2, 2 × 2 is 4, all this kind of stuff, and show you how to do it. And then you have to recite it back to them, and they'll give you some problems, and then you have to show, oh, yep, I get that 2 × 2 is 4, and that 1 + 1 is 2. I get that. And they're like, okay, great, you've got it. Let's move on to the next lesson. Like, that's, I think, how we at least here in the US, and maybe it's different elsewhere across the world, but at least here in the US, I think that's how we kind of envision the idea of a teacher. Is they give you information, you kind of memorize it and kind of internalize whatever, take it and kind of, okay, I get it now, and then go on to the next lesson. But kind of where the things through this book is talking about is the fact that when it comes to spiritual teachers, that's not how they work at all. They don't give you information. They don't tell you, here's a list of things, now you go and memorize it or whatever. What they do is they help you to discover the answer yourself, to figure it out
Mhm.
yourself. Um, and this is actually something I talked about with my daughter last night because she's doing math problems. And so she had a worksheet or whatever like that. And so she's like, and when she does the work, she's got this stuff and I won't tell her how to do the problem. Like I won't, I'm like, here's some tips. Maybe here's some ways to kind of go about doing it, but I'm not going to tell you what the answer is. You got to figure it out at the end. And yes, I will tell you if it's wrong, you need to look, you need to do it again, but I'm not going to tell you what the answer to this math problem is. You've got to figure it out.
Mhm.
And that's kind of how this goes. She's like, oh, thank you for, she's like, I like how you tell me like the tricks and the stuff of how to figure it out. That's, because that way she's actually learning it and not just kind of repeating back and forth to me. And that's a little bit of how I kind of see this too, is that like a real, like a spiritual teacher is not someone who's going to be giving you information throwing at you. They're going to show you how to, they're going to say, they're going to help you come to the answers to on your own. Maybe they'll twist you or kind of take you and put your attention someplace to focus on that'll help you get there, or maybe put a little kernel of something in your head that'll kind of get you down maybe the right path. But they're not going to say, if you do this and this steps, 1, 2, 3, you're going to end up here. Like that's for you to ultimately get to. And so teacher is probably like not really the best word for this. I think maybe more of a mentor or even like a coach, honestly.
Or guide is a word sometimes
Something, yeah.
that comes up
But
in
even
there.
that to kind of, sometimes I think people think of guides as someone who says, all right, you need to go to the left here and to the right here. And that's not even what we're talking about.
Well, I think it's interesting because as you bring up, like with your daughter, I mean, you could give her the answer. You know the
Sure.
answer. But if you just give her the answer, it doesn't help her,
Right.
right? Because next time she needs to try to figure something out, she doesn't know how to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why, again, a lot of times you don't get the answers from someone else. You have to get them on your own. You have to learn them on your own. And I think, one thing too, I believe we've talked about this on a previous episode at some point, because I had somebody on LinkedIn, I think, messaging me about podcasts and asking me something, and the idea that a lot of times the answers are hidden as well, or
Mm-hmm.
that the way that they teach is so that only those who are ready will actually hear the message,
Right.
right? And that goes back to a universal kind of code of conduct and law of do no harm, right? And so, again, someone who is truly, a spiritual teacher or master is not going to do anything that would hurt you, right? Because that's just not how they operate. And so
Mm-hmm.
they might kind of give you some answers in a vague way, so that if you're not ready, or you're not ready to kind of take the next step, that you're not going to be damning yourself effectively by not, and that's the wrong word too,
Right.
but that you won't be you know accountable for something that that you can't do. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's interesting. I think it was Lao Tzu who said something about this, that and I'm going to call it the finger in the moon. Okay, so that everybody listening, you can remember the finger in the moon, and I'm not talking about the old middle finger, right? But the finger in the moon is that, a lot of times what will happen is a master will be pointing to the moon and telling you about the moon, but we unfortunately only focus on the finger, right? And so they're pointing to the moon, they're trying to share something with us about the moon, but we only can see the finger. And a lot of times I think, and maybe that's one reason too why people try to go the easy way of just having somebody give them the answer, because a lot of times it feels like you're not really getting an answer. You ask a question,
Right.
you get a question back, and it's like, come on, just answer my question. But it's like, no, that's not how it works. That's not how this is, right? That you have to come to the answers on your own, and you have to realize quit focusing on their finger and look at what they're actually pointing to, right? Because a lot of times too, that's why, I mean, go back to any sacred text, and pick out the non-dogmatic, non-historical event kind of things from it, and you will find that there are things in there that seem contradictory, or that seem to not really answer the question. Like, and again, I think this comes from the Tao Te Ching from Lao Tzu as well, which is, if you want to be straight, be crooked. If you want to be straight, be crooked. And it's like, what does that even mean, right? Is that a lot of times these things are so deep or have so many different meanings that, depending on where you're at in your life, they can mean different things. But they're taught in that way so that those same things that you're being taught can mean different things to you. So as an example, one that I've been taught is, where your attention is, that is where you are. You are where your attention is. Now, that seems like a very, very simple thing. But I will tell you, it is very, very deep, and it has many, 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 many meanings, right? Because again, I've been taught that, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. And over the course of 3 or 4 years, that statement has come to mean so many different things to me, and has answered so many different questions depending on where I happen to be at that time in my life.
Yeah. And I like, this kind of goes back, I think, to the original example you gave about the gods, is that, the reason why they had to hide the secrets of the universe is because the people aren't ready for that. And so it's through figuring out that it's inside, that process of getting you there makes you ready for what you find, essentially. And I love the idea of, things having the deeper meanings as you go through. Something very simple, like you said, you are where your attention is. And I've noticed the same thing. I was taught same time about you were, the 3D kind of what that means of, well, if I'm focusing on the things over here, then that's kind of where I am. I'm dealing with this stuff. And that's great. And it has a lot of meaning there, but that's merely the tip of the iceberg. And the more you kind of go down this rabbit hole of spirituality, you kind of see that it means more and more, and it can mean something different here and different there. And it's kind of was one of those universals that you keep finding more meaning behind it.
Well, and I think that's why too. I mean, on this path, so many of the answers are very simple. They're very, very simple. They're not easy to do, but they're very simple concepts. They're very simple things for us to do, right? And a lot of times, either we discount them because we think they're too simple, or we think, surely that can't really be the answer. It needs to be much more complicated, so I have to make it much more complicated, right?
Yep.
And I'll give you an example. One of my mentors talks about one of the practices is blessing water, right? And so again, especially if you're kind of from a Christian background, it's common for people to bless their food, right, before they eat. Well, you can do the same thing with water, right? And so, one of the things a lot of times, because this has been recounted to me, where my mentor said, a lot of time people will ask me, well, what's the most powerful spiritual practice I can do? And he says, bless the water. And they're like, what? No, bless the water? He's like, how many times do you come in contact with water every day? You stop and start to think about that. And what if you're placing your attention on blessing the water and being grateful for water every time you come in contact with water? What is our body mainly made of? 70 to 80% of our body is water. We are water walking the land in light, right? And so if you can't even see that, if you can't be grateful for that, if you can't bless that, then where are you? Right? But a lot of people think it's so simple that that can't be the answer. Or they'll come back and they'll say, well, how do I bless the water? What little ritual do I need to go through and do to be able to bless my water properly? Right?
Mhm.
And the answer, just I bless this water. It's that simple. You don't have to do any like little woo hand movements or anything about it. You just have to have the thought, right? I bless this water. That's all you have to do or say, right? And again, it's so simple that most people won't do it, but it's very powerful. And again, that's kind of the way that true spiritual teachers or masters teach is, again, it seems so simple, um, that most people won't actually do it.
Mhm. Yeah, because we like to make things as people hard, and
Mhm.
especially as professionals, we really like to make things hard.
Oh yeah.
Because if it's easy, then that can't be the answer. Like it's got to be more difficult. There's got to be more to it than this. There's got to be more complications, and and so we look for those things to add to make things harder than they really need to be. Um, but
Yeah, because
again,
it's like, I mean, again, imagine if you were to take that particular practice and you were going to say, well, if I'm going to do it and I'm going to do it right, I'm going to put together like this 30-second ritual that every time I come in contact with water, I'm going to make a cross and I'm going to do this or that or whatever, right? It's like, well, how often would you actually do it if you try to make it complicated?
mhm,
But if you just place your awareness on it, if you just have gratitude, every single time you come in contact with water, I mean, again, I'm in contact with water right now. I'm just sitting here, but I'm in contact with water in my body. I pick up my coffee cup. Oh, it's coffee. Yeah, but what is it really? It's
water,
water with coffee
some
and some
yeah,
milk and cream, right? So I'm
with the
right
milk
now,
has and the cream has water in it.
80% of milk is water, right? So I just,
Mhm,
again, came in contact with water. And again, it's very simple, but can you do it every time you come in contact with water? That's the hard part.
mhm,
It's very simple to do, but can you move your attention there every time you come in contact with water? That's the hard part, right? But it's through those things and it's through the work. And I think that's another reason too why the answers are inside. We never appreciate something unless we have to work for it. Unless we
mhm,
have to put in some time and effort or money or energy to it, we never really appreciate it,
mhm,
right? And so I'll give you just a simple example. When I left home and went to college my freshman year, bless my parents, they gave me a little allowance. They paid for my apartment, and they gave me a little monthly like food allowance, right?
mhm,
Which was great. They paid for everything. I didn't really have to do anything. So I played my guitar a lot my freshman year of college, and I went from an A student to a B student. Got a solid 3.0 my first year in college, right? Now, why? Well, because I didn't have to put forth much effort, right? And part of it was a learning for me too, but I wasn't paying for it, so I didn't have to really appreciate it. Now, so what happened? My parents kind of cut me off, right? They're like, well, you can pay for your own college now. Well, what happened the last 3.5 years of my undergrad? I had
4.0
to
for
pay,
Jason.
I had to pay for it. Well, it wasn't a 3.0. I got one B,
Oh,
right? I got one B my last 3.5 years, right? Now, what was the difference? A lot of it was I was the one responsible for it. I was the one paying for it. I was the one putting in the effort. And if I'm going
mhm,
to pay for it, I'm going to get the better results as well, right? And so
sure.
it's the same way, here in on the spiritual path, right? Is you're the one who's putting in the time, the effort, the energy, the money, whatever it happens to be, you're going to be the one that gets the results. But if somebody just hands you the answers, right, you're not really putting in any effort, you're not really learning, you actually don't even value it. Right.
Right.
And again, people
Mm-hmm.
don't think that. I just did a live about, nothing in life is free, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's an important concept because again, it's, if you're getting something without any effort, you're not going to appreciate it. You're not going
Mm-hmm.
to actually get the benefit from it. And
Yep.
so, again, that's why we have to go inside. Inside is where the answers actually are.
Yeah. So my
But you have to
example,
do the work to get there.
my example of that is when I kind of started my law practice, I did criminal appointed work. So people
Mhm.
who couldn't afford a lawyer, the court would appoint them a lawyer. And so I would help, and it's I mean it's small stuff. It's a theft or misdemeanor stuff, nothing big and serious at the time. But those clients who got their work for free, who were through my appointed versus my private clients, those people did not appreciate the work that I did for them.
Mhm.
I could get them a great result. I could get all the charges dismissed. I could get a really good deal for them, whatever. And and they would always turn up unhappy with things because they didn't get what they thought they should get. They didn't appreciate the work they actually put in.
Mhm.
Versus I had a client who got, I think it was a speeding ticket, or was a speeding ticket? No, she was in a store and something happened. I think she just got flustered and walked out without paying for something. And so got charged with theft. And she was all upset about it and came to me and she paid. This was a paying client. And, we got it kind of reduced or whatever like that. And she was so grateful for what I did for her that
Yeah.
she actually gave me a gift besides my fee
Mhm.
because she appreciated what I did for her. While I got better results for another client that was appointed, and they were like, "What the heck are you doing? This is why didn't you get me better?" Like, and so I mean, that's just a kind of a concrete example of the fact that if somebody doesn't have any skin in the game, if they've not paid for something, they're not going to appreciate it. I mean, think of all the courses and things that you might have, free master class or, free webinars that maybe you sign up for. Maybe you went, maybe you didn't if you didn't have to pay for it. And I can almost guarantee you never looked at it once it was over. You never went back to it, because you didn't appreciate it. You didn't pay for anything besides a little bit of your time. And so it probably just sits there and you've forgotten everything that they taught you. And, you're no better off than you were before. You might as well not even done it in the first place versus the programs that you actually have to pay for, the ones that you're spending $1,000 for, 2,000, whatever like that. Those are the ones that you really get something out of because you're really paying attention, putting the effort into it, um, appreciating what you've got there. And so you actually get more value out of that program because of what you paid for it than the
Mhm.
one that you didn't have to pay anything, or you had to pay, you know, a nominal fee, $9 or whatever, the psychology says that it needs to end in or whatever nowadays. So, um,
Well, and it's funny because even as you're talking about like the courses, I mean, that applies here in the spiritual realm too.
mhm.
And it doesn't mean that you have to go, spend thousands of dollars
Right.
for some kind of spiritual course, but it's the same idea, right? Is that if something is kind of free to you or the answers are just given to you and you don't really have to do any work,
Hmm.
then the learning doesn't ever really apply. And so it's great, if you're surrounded by, let's say you're in a group of people and they're just kind of giving you all the answers and helping you go along, at some point you're going to be by yourself,
Hmm.
right? And so if they have just kind of force fed you everything, then you don't know what to do when they're not around. Right. And again, people that are charlatans, they love that because then you have to keep paying them.
You
Right.
just go
Sort of a
back to
thing.
them.
Right.
Right.
You have to keep going back to them. You're fishing and giving people fish instead of teaching them how to fish. Right. But in this world, I mean, the reality is you're never alone, but we're by ourselves a lot of our life. And if you don't know how to deal with it, then you're going to starve. Right. I mean, right now I live by myself.
Mhm.
I know how to cook some basic things. But if I didn't know how to do that, I'd starve, right? Or I'd be eating in restaurants all the
You'd
time
be
because I
eating out every night. Yeah.
eating out every night because I wouldn't know how to do it, right? And so again, luckily, I was taught certain things, right? I mean, I used to hate I was a latchkey kid, so we'd come home, call mom and let her know that we were home and then she was going to be home at this time. And a lot of times she'd say, okay, Jason, you're responsible for cooking dinner tonight. I want you to do this, this, and this, right? And at the time, it's like, right? I'd rather be out playing with my friends.
Mm-hmm.
But she was teaching me life skills
Mm-hmm.
that, eventually I needed to know. I mean, it's the
Yep.
same thing. My dad took me to work with him when I was 8 years old, right? And again, it was the same thing. I was dragging my feet, rah, 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 but I mean, he was a contractor and he taught me how to pretty much do everything on a house. And that has served me well the rest of my life because, as I've owned homes or helped other people, I'm pretty handy. I've got tools, right? I can do most anything, right, around the house. But if I hadn't practiced it, if I hadn't done it, and even when something comes up, maybe it's something that I've never encountered before, I might I might go out and look at some external resources, right?
YouTube
Like
it.
YouTube, read,
Mm-hmm.
watch a few YouTube videos, maybe read a couple of web pages, but then I still have to decide what I'm going to do,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like, okay, now I have some basic information. Now I have to decide what's right for me and what choice am I going to make. That comes
Yep.
from the inside, right? And so again, even if you're looking outside for some basic information, you still have to kind of take what you've learned, come back inside and now say, okay, is this right for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's the
And what
same
does that
thing.
mean for me?
Yeah, what does it mean for me and am I going to do it, right? It's the
Mm-hmm.
same thing. Like we were talking before about, you get loaded up with all this gold and jewels and everything and you're dropping some of it, and it's like, well, I can't do 50 different things. So go
Mm-hmm.
inside myself, figure out what are the things that are right for me right now,
Mm-hmm.
and then I do those. Right. And again, it might be different than somebody else because again, when I go, with my mentor and there's other people that are there, they pick up on different things than I do. I
Mm-hmm.
do things a little bit different than maybe they do. Right. And that's okay because it's what works for me, but we also help each other learn by, oh, you do it that way, that's interesting, I'd never thought about that before, would that be right for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I can kind of come back to that and say, oh, I kind of like that, I think I want to incorporate that one piece that they're doing along with what I'm doing as well, right?
Yep.
And that's how we make it our own art. And that's why again, we're not giving any of you answers, we're just sharing some of the
Sorry,
things that
guys.
that
Yeah,
that
that's what you're
we
here
that
for.
we do, but then you have to kind of decide what's right for you and what you're going to do in your own life.
Yep.
So,
Exactly.
as we started at the beginning, right? You can look for answers outside of yourself, and I promise you will be looking the rest of your life and probably not find the answers that you're looking for. You'll probably spend tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars searching for things that you already have inside of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you have the courage to actually go there, look at it, face whatever might come up as you sit in the silence and decide what's best for you, because the answers really are inside. So, anything else, Brad, to wrap us up?
I think you pretty much hit it.
Yeah. So just start looking at that this week, right? I mean, instead of, I know one of my friends, um, well, I think it was actually the same program you and I both went through with Katie Deming, where one of the things that she suggested was like a 30-day information fast, which
Mm-hmm.
means don't read books, don't look at websites, don't do anything for 30 days, and just try to find all of your answers inside yourself instead of from something in a book. And it's a good exercise to go through. I don't necessarily encourage it for your whole life, but that's one kind of simple way that you can start actually starting to practice and train yourself to do this on your own, and just try to find the answers from within, because they're all there if you're willing to listen and ask the right questions.
Yep.
All right. So with that, everybody go out and have a great week. And we'll see you on the next episode of the podcast.
See you guys then.
See ya.